Welcome to the Independence by Design podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a business owner and ways to get unstuck from the day-to-day so we can design a business that gives us a life of independence. So, Paul, thank you for coming. So grateful that you are coming. We hit record for everybody listening, and that's already making fun of me. We're going to have this on the record. And when I saw the post that Jean was anointed as your successor, I couldn't have been happier. So for some context, Paul, I met him when I spoke at the Small Giants conference a couple years ago, and like immediately was like friends with him, and we've caught up over the years. And the long list of people that I find truly dear are like, Rob Dubay, Tracy Beck, Tom Walter. I could go on and on and on. Eric Weiger, and like, you have just developed this community of truly authentic, different types of people that I resonate a lot with. So, I didn't look, Paul, but I'll go back and I'll put your old podcast in there. You had to have been double digits. So it would have been like maybe 7-8 years ago. And
when I was on last, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't even know if you remember. It's been forever.
No, I do remember, but yeah, like if it was about the exit from my core business, that was 2012 already. So yeah, it might have been, could have been 8-9 years ago when we did it.
And I have fully appreciated now what you have built on the Small Giant side. And that's what I honestly am super curious of your journey of that process of starting something and then moving on, especially as, what I'm curious about, and we can dive in, is what that's like. I'm as part of your identity and what you've built, and like how special it is and what that is like as a transition onto something else. But before we jump in, why don't you just give a big story arc for the listeners that might not be familiar with you?
Yeah. Well, happy to do it. And again, great to talk to you again, Ryan. So I've been around a long time, and my original business career started, born and raised in Los Angeles, went to school, went to a law school, became a lawyer for a year and a half, and started a business with my two brothers in healthcare in 1985, which turned out to be a outsourced call center company for hospitals all over the U.S. And we started in Los Angeles, moved it to Texas in the mid 90s because we got a big opportunity with a large healthcare corporation, and grew it to about 400 employees, close to 40 million in revenue. And in the early days, as many of your listeners have tried to do, I'm sure we tried to raise capital and nobody would give it to us. And then, so ran it the whole time without any outside capital. Almost did a private equity deal in 2009, but walked away a couple of weeks before closing because I realized that the kind of culture that we had built and that had become my passion and my purpose in life just probably wouldn't survive. And so I decided not to do that. And then came upon a public company that I had never heard of, named Stericycle, that ultimately purchased my company, which is called BerylHealth, in 2012. And so almost 28-year run, and really enjoyed that. And I know you have expertise in and know a lot about exits and planning for those exits. And so I think I had good advice from mentors back then about how to prepare for life after. And a lot of that had to do with trying to contemplate what I would do, and or making sure I had something to do. And so leading up to that, those years, I had written a few books. I had done a lot of speaking. I had started the Small Giants community back in 2010 because I resonated with this book by Bo Burlingham, Small Giants: Companies That Choose to Be Great.
How did you get introduced to it? Like, where did that? Yeah. How did that come into your life?
Well, I just read the book in 2007. And
how did you get the book? Did someone hand it to you? Like what?
Yeah,
how did you
God, that's a great question, because I don't know how I got the book, but somebody probably gave me the book. I read it, and I was immediately drawn to these stories of these 14 companies. I said, oh, that's what I want to be. I want to be a small giant, because they were all these privately held companies that focused on certain features and functions in order to become companies who certainly wanted to grow, but wanted to grow a certain way. They wanted to make the world a better place, have these unique, intimate cultures, focus on multiple stakeholders, be profitable, but do it in a way where they're enhancing the lives of the people that work there. And so I had just finished my first book, and I write a blind email to Bo and I said, "You don't know me, but wow, I was just inspired by your book. I just finished writing a book about culture. Would you consider writing a foreword to my book?" And he actually said yes. And a couple months later, I get his foreword on my phone. I remember reading it because I was on a vacation with my family, and it was like, oh my gosh, this was incredible. And so that just started a friendship. And so for 2 years, I was bugging him about doing something more because I'm a I'm not a big networker. I'm more of a reserved guy, kind of an introvert. And yet, if I'm going to meet other people and I'm going to connect with them, and they have the same sensibility I have around life and business in particular, that's more purpose driven. That's who I want to hang out with. So I wanted to be with people that were small giants like. And I said, well, we should create a community of these people who could learn and grow from each other. And but it took a long time to convince him. And he finally said to me one day at dinner, he said, "Paul, listen, I'm a writer. I'm not a business person, but I'll support you any way you want, and if you want to do it." And so that's how we started.
What was his
And
hesitation?
well, he's slow at decisions, I think and I think he understood. I think he just wanted to see how would this work. And of
Hmm.
course, he was thrilled the idea that one, his message resonated with more than just the people that he wrote about. That there would be a way to spread the word about this philosophy in business that at the time, especially I think he wrote in 2006. Now we talk a lot more about culture and employee engagement. Back then, it was pretty unique, and companies that focused on this. So I think he had a big part in this, the evolution of business, and the we got a long way to go, but we're making a
Hmm.
lot of progress. And so we started out really as uh, a like a CEO founder peer group support group.
Hmm.
And we started having an annual conference we called the Summit, and we had a bunch of content, and we would go visit other small giants like companies. And then in 2015, we brought on a new executive director, and that's Hemsa Yaku, who came on to lead the
Go
small
Hamza.
giants community. Yeah. And so within a couple years, we made a big decision. And something we realized is that while we were thrilled to have these CEOs and founders involved, that if these practices that we're going to sustain in these companies long term, it had to come from what we call the next generation, that level below the founder
Hmm.
CEO. And so we started to dedicate and focus our efforts in the community on next gen leaders. And that's what led to the development of the Leadership Academy, this 1 year certification program, which has been going on for, 6, 7 years now. We have mentorship programs, but I have been um, just thrilled by the impact in our small way on other business owners who come in contact with this philosophy for particular people that aren't aware of it. And so it's been really fun to just, as you talked about, Ryan, some of the key people, just develop um, relationships with people that you just cherish because we don't
Hmm.
say we're like-minded, we say we're like-hearted. And so
Ooh, I
these are
like that.
people that we've had in the community that for years have had these what will be lifelong friendships that have come out of being part of the community. So that kind of gets us, almost to current. And then, a couple of years ago, Hemsa and I, who had now been working together for, I think, about 9 years, started to think about what's next. And as you resonate with, and many entrepreneurs do, we're always searching for the next thing. And,
Yeah.
and so,
First, I mean, sorry to interrupt, Paul. As you think,
yeah.
as you answer what's next, what was tugging at your heart to explore what's next? Like, what was like? How does that manifest?
Well, I'll start with a question that was raised to me at our most recent Small Giants Summit, where we brought on um, we talked about the Hall of Fame awards that we give, and actually Rob Dubay
I
won
saw
this
that.
year
Yeah.
for right. Yeah. So I'm interviewing a panel of this year's winners and last year's winners on the stage. And then I encouraged the participants to ask each other questions. So Rob turns to me as the
Of
moderator,
course
says,
you would.
he
You
said,
would.
because Rob, he says, Paul, I have a question for you. I said, well, it doesn't work that way, Rob. I'm the one asking the questions. But I said, that's okay. Go ahead. So he sort of described the arc of my career and what I was doing now with this new nonprofit that I'll tell you about. And he just looked at me and he said, why? You're like, why are you still, doing this? And what, and I'm chasing purpose. I'm always chasing purpose.
Ooh, I like
And
it.
I think that's what goes to the heart of your question, which was what that was. And as much as, um, selling my company back in 2012 put me in the position of having choice to follow my passions and do different things. Um, I'm certainly had dips along the way where I felt like, oh, this just isn't enough. And so from a almost like mental health standpoint, well, I can get down if I don't feel like I'm driven for something
Hmm.
more. Right.
Hmm.
And I think it was probably a period of time like that. And I had gone through, uh, a tough time personally. I had gone through a divorce, and so there was just a lot changing in my life. And I Hemsa was similarly going through things in her life as well. And it just she had also been doing this and running this organization beautifully for the last 9 years, and was kind of ready for a new challenge. So that led to us thinking about what could that be. And so
Oh, the
yeah.
power of the right question from the right person at the right time, huh?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. And yet, we don't know the answer, and I'm not sure we still do, but we sat like we all do. We were in Detroit at a local museum in a little cafe with a napkin and said, okay, what could we do? And the idea came up that said maybe we could transfer what we've done in the community side by building community in the business side, excuse me, but bring it to a local community, and maybe we could help an underserved community. And where better to do that than here in Detroit, which has already gone through this revitalization over the last 10 or 15 years, and incredible what's happening, but there's still a lot of need. That led to a discussion about, okay, where could we help? Where's there a need? And we ended up settling on the foundation being children, that we want to do something with children, in part because Hemsa's own personal story includes the fact that she wasn't able to have kids on her own. And so she wanted to do something where she could touch a lot of kids. And that
Cool.
led to talk about early childhood education being our focus. But then we started to think about, well, how are we going to teach these kids? And we came upon this curriculum called Reggio Emilia out of Italy that is focused less academically, but it's child led, and it's focused on things like art and culinary experiences and nature and family, all things that Hemsa and I were also passionate about in our own way. So finally, the vision for what we then called Kintsugi Village was born, which was this idea that we would build a campus, a community hub that could house all of these initiatives in one area. And so we started a new 501(c)(3). We went out and found a property here in Detroit, which is an old 40-year-old Catholic middle school that had been vacant for the last 5 years. 40,000 square feet on 2 acres. And we said, this is it. This is home. So I can get into the specifics of what we're
I
doing and all
definitely,
that, but that
yeah.
that that gives you the overview of what brought us here, and what we're focusing on today. And that did lead to, and she had already left. We had brought in two new leaders to lead the day to day, Heidi and Katie in Small Giants. But then over the last few months, when this new project became all encompassing, I felt like it's time. It's time for me to pass the torch of the Small Giants community, to someone else who can take it and run it in their own way, knowing that they would honor the tenets of Small Giants. And so Jean Moncrieff became that choice.
Oh,
who you
cool.
know, and it's gone really well. It's still new, but I know he's going to do wonderful things with it.
Oh, that's awesome, Paul. And very excited to dive into different parts of that story arc, and I think it's very helpful. If you said chasing purpose, and that resonates with me a lot. How would you articulate that for yourself? Like, what because whether it's the first business, small giants, or what you're doing now, like what does that mean to you, and how do you know if you're, to use Rob DeBay's term, aligned with your energy and where you want to be?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ryan. I'm not sure I've ever defined it specifically, but I think what it brings to mind is a couple things. One is that I feel like I always have to be driving towards something more, and whatever that is. And so wherever I am is never quite enough. Um, and the second part of that would be feeling like I'm having impact. I'm having impact, and whether it's on businesses or the community. And we say we're always in the relationship business. So if I feel like I'm impacting the lives of the people around me and enhancing them in some way, and it's not that I have any special powers. I've just been around a long time and have experienced a lot of things, and I've been fortunate enough in my business career to have the opportunity to give back in a way and have the freedom to choose how I do it, and with whom I do it,
Hmm.
all of that. So I think it's this the journey, being part of that ongoing journey and having impact. I think those are the two things that are most meaningful to me.
I love it. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, if you just even the title, Independence by Design, it's designing that alignment. And that in when you think about purpose, and I think you said that, as you say, driving towards something more. I think, as you probably familiar with a lot of the entrepreneur community that we both have been a part of for a long time, they can have the wrong goal. So you can be driving towards something more, but if it's the wrong goal, then it becomes a problem. And then if you're driving towards something more, I like the way, like I've used different words like you, or similar words to you. And like, Lloyd Reeb from the Halftime Institute. I don't know. I interviewed him
I
again a
know.
long time ago. He talks, there's something, Paul, that really stuck with me, which was, I don't know exactly what it'll look like when I get there, but I know the feeling. And
Mm,
it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, if it's kind of loose like that, and you're focused on the personal growth and driving towards it, like you said, what are like values or non-negotiables for you or your life that will make your decisions different from others, and how you would make sure you're aligned? Like, where, like, maybe some example would be like something that you'll absolutely not, you will say no way, even if there's money there, or you would make making decisions that other people might think are different, but because your clarity, it helps you make those decisions. Does that question make sense?
yeah. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is I think I've always felt the freedom to make decisions kind of regardless of what other people would do or think, right? And that's not sense of confidence as much as it's just being, being focused on, like, it's on myself and what's going to be good for me and those that I am close and those are around me. Um, Values can be very similar. Things like integrity and curiosity and joy and all these things that many of us have in common. Um, I think making sure that when you say, what might I not have done, or what's, where's the line to be drawn. Um, of course, that can be in the business that you're in, the decisions you make, and what comes to mind there is, um, getting an offer from 20 private equity firms for more money than I ever could have spent and walking away. Um, and then making decisions to take debt from on my company the first time, bring my EBITDA down by 50%. Um, just tell the team, hey, we're going back to work. And, I think that took some courage to do that, and realize it's okay because it's my show. didn't have outside investors. I wasn't responding to anybody else. Um, so I think, if we can make those tough decisions in life, whether they reflect us or they're things that we make, because we can, as small giants, we do wonderful things generally for the people that are our stakeholders, our employees. We also have to make tough decisions at times and have the
Hmm.
courage to make those tough decisions. Um, but I think, the other thing that I think about when you talk about goal setting is that I've never been focused on specific goals. For example, I didn't run my business and with the intent to sell my business. I ran my business to build a great business. I knew that my kids who were super young at the time were probably not going to take over. It wasn't going to be a generational business, but what that exit would be. I remember in the early years of people saying, what's your exit strategy? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, I knew I didn't want to be a public company. I could tell you that. Um, what I wanted to do was to build a sustainable company that was going to, last.
Hmm.
And lots of small giants type companies talk about, the 100-year company and all that.
The
That
tugboat
was
kind of
probably
mentality.
tugboat. Yeah. And, I mean, that's wonderful. And that's a little far out for me to, project. Um, but when I ultimately sold my company, even to this large public company, I did think about that. Like, will the culture survive? And since that happened in 2012, within the last couple of years, they actually sold my business
Hmm.
back into the private world, to a CEO who I've known very well and known for
No
years.
way.
And so, yeah, so it has worked out very well.
That's
Um,
awesome.
the decision to sell to them, because some could say, well, Paul, you're a small giant, why'd you sell your company at all, right? um, and once I walked away from a private equity firm, many would say, well, strategic is gonna tear you up, and you're
More
gonna just
so
be even
hypothetically.
more so,
Yep.
like, why how could you do that? And so when they first approached me, and I'd never even heard of this company, I said, no, 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 now's not the time, and all. But they stayed on me, and it took me a year to make that decision. And what turned it for me was around this decision of whether my culture would survive our culture. And I met their newly appointed CEO, Charlie, and he called me up one day. He says, Paul, I know that, my team is talking to your company about an acquisition. He said, I'm not sure if we're going to get a deal done, but I've heard so much about the culture you built at BerylHealth. I was wondering if I could come down and just meet with you for a couple of days and learn from you. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course. I would be honored, Charlie. And so he flew down, spent 2 days with me. And I said, this guy gets it. I started to think, wait, you know what? Maybe not only could our culture survive, but we might be able to have an impact on this large company
At a
who's
larger
got
scale.
25,000 employees in the public markets. And so much so that when I ultimately sold, and he said, so Paul, what do you want to do now? I knew that I didn't want to run my company anymore, or that wouldn't last as part of this big company. But I said, Charlie, I want to become the chief culture officer of Stericycle, and I'll do it for free because you'll give me the opportunity to see if what I did for small would work for big. And I've honestly never done that. And so he said, let's start Monday. And so I actually did that for 5 years. And it wasn't as easy as it is in the smaller company world for sure. But I
Was their
still believe
intent
all the
good?
same.
Like,
Yeah.
is the
Oh, yeah.
intent and everything trying to help get it done, anyways?
Yeah, and it depends. Like, his intent was honorable and always there. The senior leadership team of that public company was very cynical when I first got there. They're like, "What are you
I'm
doing here?
sure.
Like, we have exceeded Wall Street expectations for 15 years. What do we need a culture person for here?" But Charlie knew. He said, "We've never focused on our employees as a key stakeholder in the business," and he wanted that to be his stamp. And so he was very supportive of the work we did. But ultimately, what happened is they missed their Wall Street numbers one quarter, and the stock dropped 20%, and then everything started to change. And over the next couple of years, Charlie's no longer there. The leadership team, so everything has changed since then. And so you just realize, like, not bad, not good or bad. It's just the nature of a public company
Yep.
and shareholder value makes it sometimes more difficult to do some of the things that we do. So, um, you
That's
know,
super helpful. And
yeah.
yeah, I want to get into your definition of culture and how, because since you and Bo started this, or since you were probably a decade ahead of your time, I think it's like the same word as strategy now. Like no one knows what the hell it means or how to quantify it. But before I go there, Paul, I want to just explain to you real quick on like how my thinking has changed over the last 8 years,
Mm,
and how I want to kind of tee up a framework to then maybe expand on the further concept. So like, you said to build a great business. And like what I kept finding over and over again is like, and my listeners have been hearing me say this now. Like, I mean, I hate the words exit planning. I actually hate them with my soul because I don't think anybody knows what they mean. And I think the issue that I saw is there was operations and then ownership, and the owner operator, that was me at the $20 million business, or all of my people that I listened to, or that listen, or that I work with. And we conflate this ownership and operations role. And when we talk about getting out, it's like, are you job or your asset? And what I realized is, because I had a CFO business too, Paul,
hmm
in the
hmm
past, which I got out of. And now it's just this ownership playbook and how to run your company from the boardroom.
mm
I feel like it's because I think about the words small and giant and how brilliant that was, because it's an oxymoron stuck together, if that's the right word, right? It's like but it means something to the people that, like, for me, it was like, okay, I want to be small and nimble, but big in a certain way. And then, I want to get to culture in a second, but what I realized, it's not about money, but money is cash flow is the oxygen to create a good business. So yes, we are still in capitalism. We have to make profits, and the more profits we make and the more cash flow we make, the more we can overpay people, put into bonuses, make an impact. I mean, the conscious capitalism thesis.
hmm
But my point is, it's really the ownership role, Paul, that I've all the dozens of transactions that I've worked with are in the boardroom. It's the allocation of time and capital. That is the decision making of the owner of that asset. And it's that control over the asset that allows them to make, big decisions. So if they focus on growing value, as we talk about then like the ownership who makes decisions, Paul, in the cash flow statement about how to allocate capital. I'm getting geeky here for a second because I want to put context to like what I believe are like the levers of power of decision making, where if you own your business, you can decide, do I take distributions, or do I reinvest to overpay people, or do I take on debt, or do I bootstrap this? I mean, that's the ownership level. And it's nothing to do about selling other than create sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow for the ownership team. And by reinvesting into a business and their people, the people are the ones that provide the value into the marketplace, which result in cash flow. And so I'm teeing this all up because to sell or not to sell is an ownership decision, not an operated decision. But then where I'm going with this is that's where the ultimate power of, I think, the values come into play. You chose not to sell because your values as Paul decided that did not align, but you had context. And I'm curious, I'd like the context of the money. And what I'm proposing with my boardroom playbook is like understanding, as the main shareholder of a privately held entity, what do you want to be doing with your role and your time? What level of cash flow do you need? Where is it coming from? Is it W-2? Is it owner's distributions? And then what's your equity valuation? And if we have this, I mean, really, Paul, it comes down to like, I've noticed out of like the 3,000 people that have been through my workshops, fundamental lack of understanding of truly how valuations work and ownership works is the root cause of so much of this anxiety, or so much of Bo's, 75% of people regret it, like my dad and I. It's because I didn't understand the ownership side. It wasn't necessarily about selling. It was about, when you're proposed in that situation of sell to PE, keep it or not, like that decision tree, your values are coming out. And I don't know what level of clarity you had. I'm just curious. I'm like honestly looking for your thoughts about my ideas here because I think I'm trying to help people see that it's like we got to double click and see the matrix, and there's actually another layer to this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how listening to you and your expertise, and you said, you're geeking out, but I didn't know any of that shit. So like
I
that,
know
that
that's why I
you're
say
like,
geeking out because the people go,
so
oh.
yeah. So the fact that you're teaching people about that now, these aspects of it is really important. What the decisions that we made, early on, we bootstrapped because we had no choice. We didn't know
Mhm.
people with money. We tried to raise it. Nobody would give it to us. What we did make a decision in, we were in a commoditized business from the start, the call center business, in healthcare. But
Aren't you
we
happy
knew
you're
that
not doing that right now
no, we
with
could,
AI?
right, right. But we could compete with others and just be a low cost provider. But we did make a decision early on that we wanted to be a premium provider, that we
Mhm.
wanted to charge a premium price for what we do. And we had to quantify that. We had to deliver on that. But we were 25 to 30% more expensive than our next
Mm.
closest competitor in a very commoditized industry. And so that gave us the ability to generate cash flow that allowed us to keep the doors open. And lessons learned along the way when we took on some early debt and we had a $800,000 line of credit maxed out and our banker put us in what they call special assets, which was called
Oh, isn't that fun? I've been
collections,
there.
right? Yeah. And we said, well, and we didn't realize that you have to have a relationship with your bankers. You have to keep them informed, all that stuff. Well, that was it for debt. Up until the very end, we didn't take on debt anymore because I didn't want that
You didn't anybody
hassle,
telling you
right?
what to do.
We didn't know what a distribution was. I had great mentors inside and outside my business, and from a financial side, I had a couple CFOs that were just fantastic. And there was a time I remember it was 2004, so we had been in business for a long time, 19 years already. And my CFO at the time said, "Hey, Paul." You guys are generating a lot of cash. You can take distributions from the business. I said, "What's a distribution?" And so once he said that, it's like we're all in. And so then
Wait, you're telling me
yeah,
I can take more money?
right,
Yeah, that's awesome.
beyond our
Salaries, yeah.
small salaries, and then but then I learned about what it meant to try to build some personal wealth, so that reduced the risk should the roof cave in.
Hmm.
We're in a Walmart somewhere, with a big call center, and if an earthquake comes in, I'm done. It's over, right? And so I did learn with good and good financial advisors over time how to just try to build some wealth outside the company to make me feel more comfortable and sleep at night along the
Hmm.
way. But the management of sort of, cash flow and profitability, valuation lessons came from the fact that a couple of my advisors said, listen, even if you're never looking to sell, when people approach you, talk to them.
Hmm.
See what they think the gaps are in your business. I learned so much from just hearing from
Talking to
people who
people.
said, "Yeah, how do you look at my business? How would you value my business?" And so that's where I started to get a sense of it. Um, and I used that to build a story around our business too, so that when I ultimately sold um, to this public company, I ended up selling it for a multiple far higher than I ever would have expected, just because I was able to build a story around it, and timing is everything, and what we meant to them. So,
There's a lot that
so,
goes into
so
it. A lot of the
a lot that
nuances,
has to
right?
come together. But my point is, like, I just wasn't educated about all this stuff, and in a way that you are, and you are teaching others today, that I think is super important, because managing the business so that if there is an exit, you know,
Right.
I,
Whenever
I, you
optionality,
know,
right?
yeah, I mean, again, when it comes to even you said, ownership gives you the decision-making power. It's power, or it's opportunity. And I always have looked at life, and the same thing I tell my, 23-year-old daughter who already feels under pressure. She doesn't know exactly what she wants to do and has, changed her major 4 times. It's like, it's okay. Like
Right.
I changed 8 times. Like you got to let life come to you. And I
Hmm.
just feel like the right thing, if you have good values, if you work hard, if you treat people well, then the right thing is going to happen at the right time. And I just think that's been my experience in my whole life. And so I don't put too much pressure on the mechanics of all this, other than to listen to people who are much smarter than me around how to manage things. But ended up building a profitable company that put me in the position of having choice to
Hmm.
do the various things that I was able to do during the business and even after the
And
business.
afterwards and during the transaction. And I think, you know, which is like, it's interesting at how you articulate, because this is what I like, what I want personally, and what I wanted when we had the business, Paul, or like people listening in, or I think probably most of Small Giants, is like all of the complexity is frustrating because that's not why we got into the business. And then it sucks us up. And like but at the end of the day, it's like, I'm kind of free thinking here, is like, I believe that discipline sets us free. It's like if I truly want to be free floating, I have to have some structure with my morning and evening routine and how I treat my body or something like that. And so
Hmm.
I say that because when I think about a Small Giants, and I've thought a lot about for 10 years now, that 75% stat that Bo talks about. And when Bo was on my podcast one of the times, Paul, I actually titled the podcast, "Can We Finish Big and Be a Small Giant?" Because that's the question, kind of to your point of like, did I sell out? And like, here, I want to hear your thoughts about how would articulate this now after 10 years. Is I think most of the regret comes from the owner, who's also the operator, usually not understanding the trade-offs of their current situation. So even though we could let life come to us, it's like, okay, well, if I step back and kept my business like Rob did, how does that impact my personal cash flow?
Hmm.
Oh, I can do this. All right, peace. You know what I mean? Like it's this clarity, this, because like, or if it's like, if I sell, do I need some of the sale proceeds for equity? All of it? None of it? It's just this time, cash flow, and wealth dynamic, Paul. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because every Small Giant, and I think about that stat so much. It's like, well, why are like, and after 400 podcasts, like, why are so many people regret it? Well, it was either like people accidentally built a really not, they did really hard work to build a really good business, and then they accidentally got exactly what they wanted
Mm.
because they accidentally created choices, or they did good things to create choices. But so, I mean, so few people intentionally engineered the options. Not to say that they could pick the option that they wanted
Yeah.
perfectly, but they wanted to engineer a set of options. And I think about like the Small Giants, it's like, well, and I want to hear your definition of the Small Giants, and we can kind of profile some people, because I think a lot of people listening in would also resonate. It's like, well, it all comes down to how people are making decisions based on the money. Like, are you overpaying your people? Are you deciding to not take on current clients that suck or that, impact your values? But it's like this proliferation of like value decisions, but you have to be able to make a good business at the same time. But so there's this, whether agreed upon or it's quiet set of values, but then there's this kind of infrastructure of how those final decisions are made. Because if the owner's taking too much money out and they're pulling in like sports cars and there's no money to pay people raises, resentment. So like maybe a couple of questions within this is like thoughts about like that decision tree and like how Small Giants are different of how they make those decisions about where to allocate time and capital.
Yeah, I think that the small giants, there's not too many that even, rarely would you hear of a small giant company, not that they don't exist, that's going to sell to private equity or maybe even sell at all. Like a lot of them nowadays are thinking more about how do I sell it to my employees? How do I build a purpose trust, or how do I,
Mm-hmm.
share the wealth, so to speak? I think the idea of discipline in how you grow it is really important. Creating a profitable business, creating that premium product or service, I think is crucial. I even said to when I was the culture officer at Stericycle to this 200 salespeople at a conference one year. Like, we got to stop selling what we do and start selling who we are. I think
Mm,
that today, no matter what industry you're in,
hmm.
there's lots of other competitors that whether they deliver or not can say they do what you do, right? And
Exactly.
so how are you going to differentiate and charge that premium price? You have to figure out a way to deliver on that. And in our case, it was culture and articulating the culture in a way that our clients were willing to pay for that because they saw how that impacted the value that they received from us. But all that was by design and on purpose and with discipline to allow us to charge that premium price that gave us the opportunity to create the great culture, to pay, great salaries, and to treat people well. Because I always said our company existed to enhance the lives of the people that worked here. Yeah, we have customers, but we're here about each other. But along the way, we're trying to make the world a better place. We're doing great things. I think where we get off track is not understanding the impact of those decisions along the way. Small giant, non-small giant.
Hmm.
If we're not educated, and again, I didn't go to school for any of this, but I had mentors who would say that to me, and even recently. So like I'm dealing with this the last year, right? So I told you I went through a divorce. Okay, so that changed my financial outlook, right, in a big way.
Yeah.
Um, and then we start this new nonprofit, and we bought a building and we're doing construction on their building. So I'm personally, investing slash donating a lot of money into that. And guess what's happened in our government and the craziness in Wall Street and everything. So I've had multiple calls with my financial advisor, and I've had the same financial team for 30 years. And they taught me early on, the ups and downs of the market. Don't worry, it's all going to eventually go up. And I've lived by that. Never bothered me, didn't give it a second thought, never made a call, said I'm nervous until like this year, because of the confluence of all these things. And I
Yeah.
called it
A lot of
is
constraints coming into play.
yeah, and I called I call them is it am I going to be okay calls, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm looking, look, I'm selfishly like I've, lived a certain lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm going to be around for hopefully 30 more years. I've got my kids and all that. And I want to make sure like, okay, no matter what, I mean, I've gotten all this financial freedom that I earned over many years, but the picture changes in time. So what do? I go back to my
Hmm.
wise team and say, am I going to be okay? And I rely and trust them to help me figure that out. I wish I was smarter to be able to do the math on my own. I'm just not. And so
There's only so much
again,
brain
I've been,
activity, anyways.
yeah, so I've always been fortunate, um, but to me, it hasn't been an A or B. The idea that you talk about culture and what it is, that you can create a wonderful culture and treat people well, pay them well, and and still make a lot of money. Those can go together. As a
Well,
matter of
I
fact,
think
I think one leads to the other, and so it's not
bingo.
a
I
choice you
think.
have to make.
Well, in 100%, from my own experience as well as like, and this is why as I want to double click into culture, because I think the only word that comes to mind, Paul, is faith. You have to have faith that that is how it works, because I'll give you my very nuanced mechanical example. Like when I was building out the IT services in our copier business, it was the exact opposite business model where like my dad went back, when he was selling copiers, I mean, it was 200% margin, like he'd get it all up front and you could just like, it hit a lot of painful sins, right? We're in the services business, the people are the delivery, and we're like what 60% of a services economy now. And even if you're selling, like at this point, everything's a commodity, and even LLMs and AI right now are a commodity besides the computing power behind it. So your words that you use resonate with me because we're all people delivering services, customer service, overhead, sales, whatever it is. There's an organism, which is this company, and the people provide the experience. And when I built out the IT services, like I was fighting tooth and nail with my father like trying, like, we're gonna, hire like the cheapest people. I'm like, well, they're also not nice. They're a-holes. They don't have good ethics. And I'm like, and like those are the people that are my offering. And like then and so you're in this perpetual hamster wheel, like, of reducing costs and bad customers versus like taking the faith of like hiring the cost first or investing first. And I'm like, everything's easier. And it was just like, so I personally experienced it, but just from the service side. But I think I want to hear your definition of culture and how someone should think about it. Because a lot of my clients and listeners would agree with you on all this. I think it's a fuzzy topic. And then, like, what does the act of that faith look like? Like, what are the actions someone's doing to actually create the culture that you would consider something that is a small giant?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know that I have a great sense of a clear definition of culture, but I don't think it's soft, right? So I think culture is a discipline and a process that needs to be respected like any other process in the company. And that's what's been hard about it, is that we sort of put it last. We call it this fuzzy thing, this feeling that we have, without putting traditions and institutions behind it. And when I say culture needs to be institutionalized, it's like, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? So why do we institutionalize all these other processes? The only way culture survives, and culture is, yes, is that feeling you get, the loyalty that you create within the organization. I said, for us, culture was, how can we practically enhance the lives of the people that work within our business? This is all very tactical. There's small things that we're going to do, and those could be how we show we care about them and in the totality of their lives, how we train and onboard them, how disciplined we are about hiring, how disciplined and compassionate we are about firing, reward and recognition programs, training and development programs, all these things. But more than just the existence of them, it's the consistent execution over time. Because what
Mm-hmm.
happens with most companies when we start to see the clouds on the horizon financially is we start to pull back on these things that actually mean the most to our employees instead of doubling down on them, right?
Mm.
And and I remember the time that probably felt the best about not only the definition but the ROI of culture was my first CFO, Pat, who, when he came to Beryl, saw all these things that we were doing, and he thought kind of a bunch of them were a waste of time. These events we were holding and benefits, unique
Speaking like a true
benefits, and
CFO.
yeah. And 2 years later, he and I are in Indiana driving around to see a client. And he said, Paul, after a couple of years, it's really hit me that the culture of BerylHealth is like a circle. He said, if it seems to me that if we focus first and foremost on our employees and gain their loyalty with the environment we create for them, that's going to then drive customer loyalty. And if our customers are loyal, that's going to drive profitability into our business. And then what we can do is we can take that profit, we can reinvest it back in our people, giving them better tools and resources to do their jobs. And I said, exactly, Pat. And so that we called that the circle of growth. And so that became like our calling card ever since, those years, like in the early 2000s. It said, it's about the circle of growth. And that's the philosophy that I feel defines the culture, which is to focus inside. And, again, this isn't a new topic. I'm not sharing anything people haven't already heard in some respect or another. But one is that we're not all wired this way. I grew up with, started a business with my two brothers. We'd never been in business before. Our parents raised three boys with good values that said, always treat people with respect, never burn a bridge. And then we realized pretty early on that not all companies work that way. And our own
Mm-hmm.
employees were telling us what we were doing was unique. We said, okay, well, let's keep doing it. Let's do it more. And we started to see the results of that. So that's the genesis. It wasn't really by design, but we knew it was unique. Now, I've always said, like, I don't want BerylHealth to be unique. I want this to be the standard way business is done. And I've seen a lot of progress over the last 20 years, but
Hmm.
still there's plenty of command and control run companies that run well. And because that's the way it used to be done. And, I think you're seeing not only are companies wanting to do things differently, but in a way they're being forced to do things differently because new generations want something more. They want something
Totally.
more than just a paycheck. And so, culture is just to me the combination of the small things we do to create an environment in which our employees thrive. The rest of it turning into customer loyalty, turning into to a profitable business that we can reinvest. Those are disciplines, so we have to have our fingers on each of those to make sure
Hmm.
we're managing them well. But they do require discipline and tough decisions. And yes,
Quantifiable things too.
yeah, we got rid of clients that, I remember getting rid of $1 million client annually that was treating our account managers horribly. Right.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So, you have to have faith. You have to have values. You have to have a line that you're going to draw. I remember doing an interview years ago in Dallas, and they were talking about. I said it's almost spiritual what exists. I said I'm not a particularly religious guy, but but I said it's like the spiritual feeling. They're guideposts that we live
Hmm.
by, and I said that allows us to make certain decisions. And so when I saw the values at my company best in action, when I would be at a leadership team meeting and we'd say, well, we got this problem going on with a certain employee. And somebody says, well, the employee manual is really clear on that. This is what we need to do. And then someone else says, but wait a minute. One of our values is always do the right thing. And in this case, the right thing is not what's in the manual. And I said, aha, they're using one of the core values. And so they were things that people could really adhere to. And when your values impact decision making and you do that with discipline, then I think you built a great culture.
Ooh. When your values impact your decision making, I think you've built a great culture. I love that. And I think to do that, we have to define all of them.
Hmm.
And what's interesting, I'm going to probably butcher this concept, Paul, but it's something that I've been reading a lot of books on, like different cultures and like history. I'm a history geek now. And you said that it wasn't by design, but let me see if what you did was not by design. But what I learned is that a lot of culture and people over time, they act things out before they define them. We actually do things and make decisions based on what we believe first, then define them second.
Yeah.
So somehow, I mean, you said you and your brothers were set up with a set of core values where some way along the way, while you were driving towards something more in your growth, you were making intentional decisions to not keep that client when there was money there, not sell the business when there was more money there. So you were saying no. And actually, I heard recently, Paul, the decision making and thinking is like my new, like,
Mm,
north, like shiny thing. It's like, the word decide actually means to eliminate all other options.
mm,
So like the natural part, like the decision to say we're going to do the right thing, we're going to keep this person, or we're going to let them go, or we're going to do this, is eliminating everything else because of what you have determined was important at the end
hmm.
of the day. And that's what culture ends up becoming, is those series of micro decisions. I don't know what your
Yeah.
thoughts are on that, but
No, no.
it's
What resonates the most is that we define it afterwards. You're absolutely right.
isn't
We
that
we
cool?
look back and going, yeah, this is what we did for whatever reason. We could try to figure out what that reason was. Now let's try to structure it. Let's put
Package it up,
some
right?
definition and let's package it. Exactly.
And that's where I think about as what small giants are. And like it's actually what I realized that I have tried to do, because like I won't name my old name on my podcast because I can't, but I was trying to figure out, like with Bo, it's like, well, how did all these people regret this? It just doesn't, I mean, I was one of them. Like, and then there's like 1 out of 4 that like are perfectly happy. Well, what did they do? And then I realized that very few people, like, so the people that like were super happy, it was difficult to determine what they did on purpose. Even though I think that they did. Like, I think you did do it on purpose. Like, you said no to a large offer. You then
Mhm.
started Small Giants. You packaged up what you thought were important. But I guess my role in this journey is like trying to articulate what those people did in more nuanced ways to make it more repeatable. Kind of like what you are working on with culture. It's like, okay, like culture is not just fuzzy things. Like there's something here. Because like if Eric Rieger or Rob Dubay or Tom Walter, I mean, all these people are magical. How are they able to take some time and step back without the whole thing crumbling? Right. So there
Yeah.
has to be a process of like that articulation and osmosis. But I don't know. I think it's super fascinating because like that's what I see where the Small Giants becomes a environment, and why I think you should be so proud of what you've built, because these words are used too much. They don't mean anything to a lot of people anymore. But I think that all the people that I work with that listen to this show and come to the Small Giants, they actually believe it. Like I walked in that summit, I was like, these are freaking awesome people
Mhm.
because they're authentic, they're genuine, and it's not bullshit. Because you could walk into a room of whatever peer group, and they all say the same thing. I just go, God, these are just their mouthpieces, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, how did you, when you were working with Bo, how did you start defining it, or did you just start using your gut, and did it just organically grow? And now, over the years, there's been this process to package this up so you can hand it off to someone like Jean.
Yeah. Well, again, it's all very organic. So what Bo did is he put some definition to the things that he saw in these companies. Um, and there were, I think, 6 of them, and I'm not even sure I can recite exactly what 6 they
I
were.
won't hold you to it.
Yeah. No, but the point being that it's something when you resonate with something and then you try to align yourself with that general philosophy, doesn't mean you do it exactly the same way. Like when somebody aspires to be a small giant or want to be a part of the community, we don't charge a membership fee. We don't do an assessment to see if you align with these 6 things. Do you resonate? Do you want to carry on these very tactical practices in your business? Biggest question I always get is not, um, yes, I'm a small giant. It's like, yes, I believe in these kinds of things. I just don't know how to do it every day. And I don't know how to train my leadership team. I don't know how to make it consistent. I don't know how to create the discipline. And that's really all we do. So what you do is you attract people like you saw, I think it was 2022 when you did a great job of presenting at the summit, um, who are like-hearted. And when you're in a room with them, and everybody else is outside the room, then that's where that magic happens. And you just feel
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, these people are real, they're genuine, they're vulnerable, they're just willing to share, they're imperfect, all of that. And so that's what brings us together. How we're specifically defined is less important. It's storytelling, it's best practices, it's, knowing that none of us actually have none or any of us have all the answers. We're just kind of figuring this as we go. And so um, we have found, if anything, that there are many more companies out there that would resonate with this message. They just don't know about the small giants community. Now, the good news is over the last 10, 15 years, there's been organizations like Tugboat, Conscious Capitalism, others that follow along this same sort of purpose driven path. And the more the
Mm-hmm.
merrier, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
however they deliver on that, that's wonderful. So it's bringing community together, and that's something that I know will continue. I told you that we started to focus more on the next generation leaders, um, and there's plenty of CEO groups and founder groups out there. And the beautiful thing about, I think, transition is that one is we have to realize at some point that it's time, right? And and one, and or it's time, it could be ability, right? I don't know that I could have grown company my healthcare company to be $100 million company. I wasn't the guy to do that, right? I knew, nor did I want to do that. With Small Giants, we've had, I think, an impact on the companies we've touched, but there's many more companies out there. And to bring in somebody like Jean with his entrepreneurial spirit and adherence to those same values, he may grow it in a completely different way. And good for him, right? Because I realized when I sold my first company, I didn't have any ego about it. And I knew that however, whoever took it over after that may run it differently. All I just wanted to know was that I did my best to protect the lives of the people that I supported all those years. And I think what you said really interestingly, Ryan, about finish big or this 75% is again back to this thing that we all may think that we have thought of everything as we approach an exit, but the truth is only looking back. Right. So, all those that felt like, my employees are going to be taken care of, and a year later, um, realize that the acquirer tore the whole thing down and they're miserable and now they regret it, or they thought that life was going to be okay taking an earn out and working for that company for a year or two to get that second bite of the apple. But then what happened? They're fighting with
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
acquiring company, and the money's not there, and so there's so many things that could go wrong. So whether it's money, timing, the maintenance of the culture, the
Hmm.
relationships that you built, your own family, like so many things have to line up and go right. And I think that, and some of that is planning, some of that is luck, right?
Hmm.
And fortune. And so, I look back at that exit and feel very fortunate with all aspects of it. Um, and not that everything was perfect, but I was one that Bo talked to for Finish Big, and it was like, yeah, looking back, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I thought long and hard about what I might be doing afterwards, which people don't, feel, again, the old
Yep.
adage, like you can't just go play golf or whatever. But beyond that, like I said, it hasn't been perfect. There's still dips along the way, 12 years later.
But what I heard from what you said, and I resonate a lot with, is doing what you think is in your best ability to provide the best outcome, but then being okay after the decision is made. Is that a fair way
Yeah,
of
I think so.
putting
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And I think there's two parts that I think have to be done equally, executed equally well. One is looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I actually did, and I believe myself that I did everything that I could. And then the second part is actually letting go, right? And
Yeah.
then actually being graceful to yourself. And I think the more that we believe we did everything that we could, the more we can actually let go. And I was very caught off guard when I interviewed Chris, the co-founder of MapQuest. I
Mm.
had to, I got into this great conversation with him. And I had to ask him, like, I mean, come on, man. Like, you had it like all as MapQuest, and like it just got evaporated off the face of the earth. And he goes, it's fine. I just understood like that was a potential possibility. And he had no negative emotion about it at all. And I was just like,
Mm.
you could tell that he had truly done both of those things
Yeah.
in order to be comfortable so you can actually be peaceful in your head, I think.
Yeah, I think it takes humility and a lack of ego, which is hard for entrepreneurs, right? And so um, I realized even after I sold my company, um, 6 months later, I noticed that, they like from a selling standpoint, marketing standpoint, they weren't doing things maybe the way I would have done them. And I said, it's not my show. It's not my show. But I didn't let it
Was
bother
that
me.
always part of your character of no ego, or how did you get to that point where you
Well,
could do that?
I'm sure I've got, just like everybody, I've got one, but I think hopefully it's placed correctly. I don't think that's the place for it. And it's learning over many years that, control what you can control. And so I think I again try to live by those same values that my parents gave me of hard work and and integrity and making the best decisions and trying to impact the lives of the people around me. And generally speaking, it's been, I've been paid back for all of that
Mhm.
many times over. And so I just keep that same philosophy.
When you look at Small Giants, what's the thing you're most proud of?
Um, I'm just proud of each and every person that we've touched. And I think I'll hear more about that even going forward. Um, and the letters I got when I sent that note out that I think you saw that I was passing the torch to Jean, and just the notes that I received in response to that were just so heartwarming. My old company, BerylHealth, I think it was during COVID, they the ex-employees, so sold 12 years ago, but the employees decided to create a BerylHealth Facebook page for ex-employees. Immediately, like 300 people are on there, and
Oh, that's cool.
and the things that I to this day they're posting and sharing about how that company was the best place they ever worked, and the culture that was created by my brothers and I, and just like that's it. It's just like that's impact is like when you just hear from someone else. It's not what I think; it's what others think about it. And so, even when people said to me, we were talking about the most recent summit here in April in Detroit, and people said, "What did you think of the summit?" I said, "What did you think? It doesn't matter what I think." And so, when I get those messages um, from people like Rob and Tom and Eric, and and they just said that the existence of the community impacted their businesses and their lives in a way that in some ways is immeasurable. That's what's most meaningful to me.
What are you most excited about for the next journey? Like, you got to be chomping at the bit now to, I mean, it's given that you're an entrepreneur too. I appreciate you talking about your past journey and everything. If you're like most of us, you're 75% in that bucket already. So it's probably been, a struggle, going back, but like, what are you excited about? Tell us like, what's the vision? Where's it headed?
Well, the uh, Kintsugi Village is the name of the nonprofit, and I've said to people that I believe in my heart that this may be the most impactful thing that I've been involved in, and to basically transform a local community, to build this community hub where we can help impact children in a way that's measurable over time, help up and coming artists in Detroit hone their craft and learn about business, have culinary classes for the local community, and uh, all sorts of nature things going on, and bringing in families and touching them. We just started registration for the early childhood center that we're going to open up in October. And we actually have customers, we have families who have signed up, and they're excited about what we're going to do. And from what we hear, there's been nothing like this model that we're developing that we hope we can scale over time. So we got a long way to go before we scale. We got to just get this one done.
What's the
But I think,
thesis behind what you're doing? Like, what's the thesis, and then how is what you're doing solving it?
well, you can look at each of them individually. For example, in Detroit, there's a huge lack of early childhood education quality or even seats, in the
Hmm.
thousands. So, and then the way these kids are taught and the way we hope to be able to teach them to measure that impact over time. But we're bringing all these other aspects of the curriculum to life. So we're going to have a huge art program with studio spaces and a gallery, and the kids are going to go up and take art classes, and the artists are going to teach in the school, and the chefs are going to have a community garden outside. Everything is going to be in this ecosystem that works together. Can I tell you today how we're going to measure impact 10 years from now? I can't. We're still working on that. And the donors we're trying to bring
You
in are
do
going to
first,
ask
like
us
we
for
talked
all
about,
that.
right?
Yeah, you just do first. Um, and the fun thing about it, Ryan, is that we've never done functionally anything that we're doing now. We've never rehabbed a historical building. We've never started a school,
How fun.
started an art program. But it's that drive. It's experience. We know how to build community. We know how to build an organization. there's so much passion here in the city of Detroit and such great need that we're just excited to have the opportunity and honestly just grateful to be able to
That's
be in
awesome.
this place to do this kind of work.
Um, can I tell you why I think what you're doing is going to create a bunch of impact?
Sure.
Um, I have learned, so there's some data points that I have gathered. Early childhood, on the same page. I mean, my daughter, it is a dumpster fire, Paul, in the country.
Mm,
And like I like a lot of my friends are double income earners, high wage earners, or entrepreneurs, and like it's still like you're paying an arm and a leg for people to eat mac and cheese and have just a ridiculous experience.
mm,
Um, from the stuff that I've learned recently, 0 to 4, you're like getting that ball of clay really, like you're putting it in the kiln almost at that point. And like the sheer pressure of families to make money, the broken dollar system is making, like when you want to talk about, it's like that whole 1% trajectory of the plane, you end up at like those kids are now adults and now they're in the workforce. Everybody's like, well, the assembly line of the people that came out of college are not working. It's like, well, go back 30 years and plant a tree. And so like, I think what you're doing is so important. And and what's fascinating, I just read this book, AI Driven Leader, this guy, Jeff Woods, and he's coming
mm,
on the podcast. And I was not a good student at all. Like I got a D in accounting and I would teach about it. I mean, it's
mhm,
the rope memory. I think I've just got a lot of passion of how it doesn't work. And we learn this stuff. And we like what all the stuff you're talking about is so important. And Rockefeller wanted more assembly line workers 100 years ago and didn't want thinkers. And now it's
mm.
like, oddly enough, here we are. The only thing that matters with AI is how to be more human and creativity
Yeah.
and all the
Yeah.
stuff that you talked about. So like, I don't know, like everything that I've been watching and seeing and experiencing myself lends it to like what you and Hemsa are after, I think is going to be very interesting to figure out how to thread that needle. Have you heard of the blue zones?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like building like the blue zone, or like, I mean, people are living to 100 and they're perfectly happy. Well, why is that? And it's a lot of the attributes that you're
Yeah.
talking about, and be interesting to see how the business model kicks off because the need is unbelievable, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do, but we're excited to have the opportunity to take on the challenge, and I'll keep you posted. And like you said, yeah, that's so true. We'll look back, and then we'll figure out what we actually did. You know, right now we're just doing. You know,
It sounds
yeah.
excited.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're excited every
Uh,
day. You know, we're meeting wonderful people, and great vibe here in Detroit. Lots going
that's
on,
awesome.
so it's fun. Yeah.
Um, I absolutely love Hemsa, and I got to tell you, like I was giving her so much shit right before the summit, Paul. I seriously think this is one of my favorite speaking moments. So because like she's so like on it, and she just creates the best experience. I'm like almost crying thinking about this.
Mm,
It's like submit your PowerPoints. You have 2 weeks. It's got to be all this stuff, and I thought we built a good relationship. And so like I was, heckling her back and forth. And so I'm sitting in the back, right as, lunch just gets done. It's the first day. And like, all of the owners are, I don't know, it's 150 people or whatever in there. And I look at Hemsa and I'm sitting in the back. I'm like, Hemsa, I need to, I have a quick update on my PowerPoint that I need help with. The face that she looked at me with, Paul, I was like, yes, that was, and she goes, you're kidding? And I'm like, oh my God, she was so mad at me. And I was just like,
mm.
the look on her face was worth that joke in its entirety. It was so funny. But she is, so what's her like, and she is like, did you guys start talking about this idea together? Like, how did it like, because I mean, I'm
Yeah.
assuming how big of an idea this is. You guys probably were chatting away about it for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was 2 years ago when we really started talking about it.
Okay, cool.
And so yeah, it was the better part of the year when we were kind of forming this idea and then, decided to make the change and yeah, so we're both super energized by it, just, devoting our full time to it, having a blast. And she has great memories too of working with you and said to say hello. So
Oh, that's
um
awesome.
yeah, yeah. It's wonderful.
Paul, I appreciate you so much. I think the whole Small Giants community does too. And I know your community is going to appreciate you. So thank you for spending some time with me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Good to talk to you again. And thanks for all the contributions you continue to make to the entrepreneurial world. So you're educating all of us.
Appreciate it.